Yeah, I'm back again, sharing my screen. Okay, any information on whether you can see my screen then at the moment? Just let me know whether I'm audible and whether you can see my screen at the moment. Oh dear, still the same. It is unbelievable. I'm really so sorry, as I don't understand exactly what is happening here. I'm audible, but nobody can see the presentation. This is really unbelievable. I've tried again to share. I just waiting to see if there's a presentation uploaded now or if you can see my screen at the moment. It still seems that it's not possible for you to see my screen. Still nothing. Oh my goodness. I'm really so sorry about this, as I honestly don't know what the problem might be here. I do have a confirmation that it is visible now. One attendee has indicated that the screen is visible. If maybe can just more confirmation before I start with the presentation, just to make 100% sure that the screen is visible, and then we can start with the session. So I really hope the problem has been resolved. that I'm fully audible and that you can see the screen on your side as well before I start with the presentation, please. I'm sorry for the delay. It seems like my Teams is just holding up a little bit and giving me a few issues. But yeah, hopefully it's been resolved. Okay, it says that it has disappeared again. Okay, let's see if there's any feedback now, if it is visible maybe. Because on my side, it definitely shows that I am sharing my screen. So yes, okay, it says that you can see my screen now. All is good now. Okay, let me just load the presentation and then I'll just check back and make sure that you can see the screen. So the slides should be appearing now. So let me just open the slideshow and then I'll just check back. So this is the first slide that I'm going to be presenting. I'll just then check back now quickly to make sure, close this presentation and just make sure that it is fully visible on your side now. Okay, it seems like it's all good, all visible. So it seems like we can go ahead with the presentation. Okay, perfect. Sorry for the delay. Let's then get into the session regarding the slideshow and the presentation for the evening. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Once again, apologies for the issues experienced yesterday as well as the start of the session, but it seems like it has been resolved now and that I am visible. So welcome to this session for FAC 2601, Financial Accounting for Companies. My name is Frank Montgomery, and I'll be presenting this session to you tonight, one of your lecturers for FAC 2601. So the content of the lecture tonight is to look at financial instruments, in particular looking at the applicable accounting standards that apply to financial instruments through the process of going firstly through the theory and the application through practical examples that we work through towards the end of the session. And we are covering basically lesson 2.8 that deals with financial instruments. Just a few house rules. The house rules being that the session is recorded. We will provide you with opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A section at the end of the session. So I will first go through the whole session and then just once I'm done with the presentation, I will go to the Q&A section to answer any questions that you might have. The session will then be made available on MyUnisa and Moodle, where it will be uploaded once the recording has been completed, and it will be uploaded on the navigation tab. So just scroll down towards the bottom, and there you will find all the previous recordings that has been made up to this point in time. The lecturers, by now you should know, all our lecturers, Mr. Baloyi, Mr. Iseli, who have already made some of the presentations. To get in contact with us, your best option would be the module email box, which is fac2601@unisa.ac.za. because there's always one of us attending to these emails, and we try to respond to you as soon and as quickly as possible. You can also get in touch with us through the Moodle message function, where you can send each of us a individual and personal message. We will also respond to you. And then also you've got available the discussion forum. The discussion forum, which is then basically where you can start a discussion or you can join a current discussion regarding specific topics that are discussed in this forum, whether it relates to the financial instruments that we're dealing with tonight or any other topic that you would like to discuss regarding a financial or any of the other lesson tools, excuse me, that you want to discuss and have a session on, that you can basically engage in the discussion forum with regards to that session. Okay, so getting on to financial instruments. Okay, so just before I continue here, I just want to make 100% sure that everything is still up and running with regards to this session. So let me just quickly make sure if it is still visible to you all. Just don't want to go through the session again without you being able to see the presentation. So if you can just confirm whether you have seen the first few slides, and then I will just quickly open up the slides again and we can start with the session. I don't see any feedback yet, so I'm just hoping that everything is running smoothly at the moment. Okay, yes, you can see perfectly. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So let's get back into our presentation. So financial instruments is covered by 3 accounting standards. The first of those being IAS 32. Now, IAS 32, sorry about that. There we go. So IAS 32 is the first accounting standard that we are dealing with. And in IAS 32, they basically address all the definitions surrounding financial instruments. The first of those being, what is a financial instrument? Now, a financial instrument is a contract that gives rise to a financial asset of one entity and a financial liability or equity instrument of another entity. So important, first off, there needs to be a contract between two parties. And an example there would be if we sell a product on credit, it means that we will create a financial asset for us because the other party owes us the money. In their books, though, it will become a financial liability for them because obviously at a certain point in time, they need to repay that debt. So there is then this contract between the two parties, which will create a financial asset or a financial liability for the other party. Or an equity instrument if we sell shares. If they invest in shares in us, they will have an equity instrument, and for us, it will be a financial asset with the investment in shares that they made. Your primary instruments, as I've already indicated, are mostly your receivables. As I've said, if we sell something on credit, there will be a receivable due to us. On the other hand, if we purchase something on credit, we will create a liability, which is a payable, because in accordance with that contract, we will have to pay at a certain time. Or equity, and that is where we have investment that we made in shares, will be regarded as an equity financial instrument, because obviously there you purchased a certain number of shares and we will record those shares as an investment in the form of our financial instrument. As already indicated, there needs to be a contract in place. Now, contract means there's agreement between two parties, at least, with clear economic results, and there's limited discretion to avoid the obligation as it is usually enforceable by law. So basically what it means, there will be a contract, an agreement. If we sell something on credit, the agreement is that we need to produce the product to the other party. And from their side, in terms of the contract agreement, they have to pay us at a certain point in time, depending on the terms and conditions of the transaction took place. So the clear economic results there is the product that we need to deliver, and in return, the cash that we will receive once the payment is payable or becomes due. Seeing that there is a contract in place, there is no discretion to avoid the obligation, as it can be enforced by law for us to either provide them with the product, and once we've done that, the contract stipulates that they need to pay for that product at a specific point in time, according to the contract agreement terms and conditions. Once we've identified that we do have a financial instrument, we can distinguish, first of all, between a financial asset. Now, a financial asset is any form of cash that we do have. Your bank balance that you do have is regarded as a financial asset. It can be an equity instrument in the form of shares that we do have. And it can be the contractual right to cash, debtors or loans receivable. So once again, there was a contract to receive the cash when we sold something on credit or when we made a loan to a third party. Once again, there will be a specific agreement and contract in place that the loan needs to be repaid in a specific point in time. On the other side of the coin, a financial liability means we've got a contractual obligation to deliver cash at a certain point in time. If we bought something on credit, we need to settle that creditor account at a specific point in time. If we borrowed money, there will be an agreement to repay, and the repayment term of the loan will be specified. So in terms of that contract, we have the obligation to repay the loan in accordance with the rules of the loan that was provided. Or if there's an exchange of instruments that is unfavorable. So, for example, here, you might have us selling to somebody on credit. And on the other hand, we're also buying from the same supplier on credit as well. So in our books, we might have a debtor and a creditor for the same entity. If we offset those two against each other, the debtor against the creditor, and it is an unfavorable for us. In other words, if the creditor is more than the debtor, it will be an unfavorable exchange of instruments, and a net financial liability will result from such an agreement that we entered into. Equity instruments, that is straightforward. If you issue any ordinary shares, so if you issue those shares, you will receive a fixed amount of cash, because normally there is a fixed or a nominal value attached to a share. A share is worth, say, for example, R1 or R2. So when we issue the shares, we receive a fixed amount of cash in the form of the number of shares issued at the nominal value per share. So if we issue 1,000 shares with a nominal value of R2 per share, we entitled to 2,000 in total to receive in the form of cash. In return, we deliver a fixed number of shares, being the 1,000 shares, to the investor that bought into the company and invested in our shares. Okay, so that will be our equity instrument, is when we issue shares, and in terms of that contractual agreement, we receive the fixed amount of cash based on the number of shares issued at the nominal value, and we then have to deliver those fixed number of shares to our shareholder that invested in our company. The second accounting standard that deals with financial instrument is IFRS 9. Now, IFRS 9 looks at the recognition of financial instruments. So once we've identified that we are dealing with a financial instrument, it obviously needs to be recognized. In terms of recognition, IFRS 9 stipulates that the timing of the recording of the financial instrument is when a party to the contractual provisions of a financial instrument. This means if you have a contract in place, so we are one of the parties to the contractual agreement, entered into with another entity, then we will recognize this financial instrument either at the date that the entity commits to sale or purchase. So if we entered into a contract to sell something on credit, on the date that we commit to that transaction, we can recognize the financial instrument. Or if we entered into a contract to buy from a creditor, on the date that we commit to that purchase, we can recognize the financial instrument. Alternatively, it can be done on the date that the delivery takes place. So if we commit to sell something on a specific day, say the 1st of the month, but the delivery only takes place on the 15th of the month, the financial instrument can then be recognized on the date that the delivery takes place. So IFRS 9 gives you the two options with regards to the initial recognition, either on the date that the commitment for the transaction took place, or alternatively on the actual date that delivery took place. We will recognize the financial instrument as part of the initial recognition in terms of IFRS 9. At what value is this measurement? This measurement is normally at the fair value. Now, you would have come across fair value previously in some of the other lesson tools. Fair value is broadly described as the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an ordinary transaction between market participants at the measurement date. So straightforwardly, in simple terms, it means there have to be two parties. There needs to be a contract in place for us to sell an asset or to transfer and pay for a liability in a normal transaction between the two parties at the measurement date. And that measurement date, as we have already identified on the previous slide, is then on the date of commitment to such a transaction or on the date that the actual delivery takes place. Now, what the fair value of a financial instrument will be in most of the instances is the actual transaction price. Because obviously, if you enter into a transaction, if we sell something, we sell it at a fixed price. That is the price that we want to sell the item at and what we deem to be a fair value. And that would be your transaction price. If there's no transaction price available, we look at quoted market prices in an active market for similar type of products. Or if the immediate cash flow is not going to take place. So if you don't sell it immediately and receive the cash in return, in other words, if you sell it on credit, there is a future date at which you'll receive that cash. Then we will need to determine the fair value based on the discounted future cash flows to be received. Now that discounted future cash flows in terms of a debtor can be interest that we will receive over the period of the outstanding balance. In terms of equity, that will be in the form of dividends that you receive over a period of time for having the investment. Now, if none of these are possible or available to determine, we need to look at recent prices for the specific type of financial instrument we're dealing with in order to record a fair value. But as I've said, in the most instances for our purposes, there will be a fixed transaction price. And that would be the price used for the initial measurement and deemed to be the fair value of the financial instrument. There will always, or not always, there might be additional transaction costs associated with securing such a transaction regarding a financial instrument. Any costs that are directly attributable to the acquisition or disposal of a financial asset or liability, which could be in the form of any fees or commission paid to agents, any duties and transfer tax required to be paid, or any regulatory levies by security exchanges like the JSE. So if there is shares that are trading on the JSE, there will be certain levies regarding the purchase and selling of these equity instruments. Those would be considered as transaction costs in addition to the fair value or transaction price of the item. And we need to consider these as well to determine were they directly attributable to the acquisition of a financial asset or liability, because it also plays a part in how the transaction costs needs to be recognized and disclosed in the financial statements. So over and above, with regards to financial instruments, the transaction price, IFRS 9 says we also need to take consideration any associated transaction costs with that specific transaction, whether those be fees or commissions paid, duties or transfer tax, or any levies issued or by the security exchange. In addition, IFRS 9 then specifies between two types of financial instruments regarding assets and liabilities. The first thereof is a financial asset. So the instrument can be a financial asset, and that will be based on the business model and cash flow characteristics of the specific financial instrument. Now, on a financial asset, we've got two categories then again. We've got a financial asset at fair value through profit or loss, which is normally a default category. These represent financial assets held for trading. In other words, we want to speculate with them. So based on the business model of an entity, it might be that this is what they are specializing in. By speculating with shares, buying and selling shares, turning it over, trying to make a profit in that process. And the cash flow characteristics of this is then that you will receive cash at short intervals by selling the shares after you've bought them after a short while. Now, important to take into consideration, these financial assets, which are held for trading and speculate with, will be recognized initially at their fair value, the transaction price. If there is any transaction costs associated with this financial asset, you need to exclude it from the cost price of the financial asset. In other words, it is not capitalized. You will still recognize the transaction costs, but in this instance, these transaction costs will be directly expensed through profit or loss. In other words, not added to the cost price or fair value of the financial asset at the initial measurement. So at the initial measurement, only recognize the fair value of the actual asset itself. Transaction cost not included in the cost price, but expensed through profit and loss. The second category of financial assets are those at fair value through other comprehensive income. Now, these are the instruments that are not held for trading. This could be the scenario where you make an investment in shares, but you want it to appreciate in value over time. So you are more interested in the cash flow on specific dates. So if you have these shares for a long period of time, what would be those cash flows on specific dates? It will be if dividends are declared by the company in which we invested. Obviously, it's dependent on their profits, whether they declare dividends, but still we are entitled, if they declare dividends, to receive the cash flow at that specific point in time. Now, the difference here being on these instruments, if there are any associated transaction costs attributable to the transaction, it needs to be included. What do we mean include? It means capitalize the transaction cost, meaning the cost price of this financial asset will consist of the fair value, the transaction price at the initial measurement, as well as those transaction costs. So they need to be added together to get the total cost price of a financial asset. So that is the difference between the two financial assets. Those that are held for trading, you recognize and measurement initially at cost, excluding transaction cost by expensing the transaction cost through profit and loss. If they are not held for trading, you need to include the transaction cost as part of the cost price of the financial asset. As far as financial liabilities is concerned, we only have at fair value through profit or loss. In other words, liabilities held for trading, and exactly the same as was the case with the financial assets held for trading. we exclude any transaction costs. So on initial recognition of this type of a liability, you will only recognize the fair value of the transaction price as part of the cost. Any transaction costs are recognized but expensed through profit and loss and not added to the cost price of the financial liability. So exactly the same as we had for financial asset held through profit and loss. Once you've initially recognized a financial asset or liability, the subsequent measurement will entail, in other words, once you've recognized it at initial measurement at a specific point in time, at the end of each financial year, we need to look at what is the value of that asset or liability now. As far as financial assets at fair value to profit and loss is concerned, it will mean to compare the fair value at the end of the financial year with the value initially recognized. If there's a difference between the two fair values, there will be a gain or a loss. In other words, if the fair value at the end of the year is more than the initial amount that we recognize for the financial asset, there will be a gain. If the fair value, though, at the end of the year is lower than the fair value initially recognized, there will be a loss. Any of these gains and losses are recorded directly in the profit or loss account. So the difference between the two fair values, whether a gain or a loss, goes directly through profit or loss. Your financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income, however, exactly the same principle. Again, look at the fair value at the end of the year, compared to the fair value of the financial instrument when initially recognized. Any increase in value will be a gain, any decrease will be a loss. But in this instance, these gains or losses are recorded directly in equity. So not in profit or loss, but directly in equity. And again, that is the difference between these two types of financial instruments. So those that fair value through profit or loss exclude transaction costs on initial recognition, and on subsequent recognition, all gains and losses directly through profit or loss. Your financial assets that fair value through other comprehensive income, any fair value changes directly goes to gains and losses, but this is directly recorded in equity. And remember, on initial measurement to include the transaction costs. And then again, for financial liabilities, as far as subsequent measurement is concerned, again, compare the fair value at the end of the year with the initial fair value recognized. Any gain or loss will be recorded directly in profit or loss, because these again are speculative liabilities. In other words, turning over more than once per year, it is basically a short-term asset, and therefore any changes are directly recorded in our profit or loss account for the current financial year. The final statement that deals with financial instrument is IFRS 7, and IFRS 7 specifically looks at disclosure. Okay, so how and where do we disclose our financial instruments? Basically, in two of our statements. In the statement of financial position, you'll disclose the value at the end of the financial year. As we've said, at the end of each year, we need to establish the fair value of all financial instruments. That fair value as at the end of the year is then disclosed in the statement of financial position. In the statement of the profit or loss and other comprehensive income, we've already identified that any gains or losses in fair value will be recognized, whether it be directly through profit or loss or other comprehensive income, as well as other income and expenses related to the financial instrument. Your income might be in the form of interest that you received on outstanding debtors, interest received on outstanding loans, dividends that we received. The expenses here could be, for example, transaction costs that needs to be expensed with regards to our speculative liabilities and assets. Remember, I said these expenses, the transaction costs are not capitalized, but directly expensed through the profit or loss statement in the current year that the expense was incurred. So that is what IFRS 7 tells us to disclose at the end of a financial period. And that in brief is the summary regarding the 3 accounting standards that deal with financial instruments. So the first one, IAS 32, looking at the definitions, firstly to determine what is a financial instrument, and then the distinction between your financial assets and liabilities. Then we've got IFRS 9 that looks at initial and subsequent measurement, how these instruments need to be measured initially and how they need to be measured subsequently, and what to do with any differences in those fair value. And then finally, IFRS 7 dealing with the disclosure in the financial statements, where we disclose the end fair value in the statement of financial position, and then in your statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, any gains or losses in the fair value and any income and expenses related to the financial instruments. So that covers in the part as far as the theory is concerned on financial instruments. So let's look at a few practical applications through the following examples. So in this question, the part A asks us to briefly discuss the applicable accounting treatment of the following financial instruments. So here we've identified our financial assets at fair value through profit or loss, and the financial assets at fair value through other comprehensive income. And the applicable accounting treatment you need to discuss relating to the initial measurement of both, the subsequent measurement of both, and then any gains or losses on remeasurement. How does it need to be treated in the accounting records? So financial asset at fair value through profit or loss, we've said initially measurement at fair value. That fair value then normally the transaction price or discounted cash flows or market related values, excluding the transaction costs. So the cost price of the financial assets only consists of the initial fair value. You exclude transaction costs because those will go through your profit and loss. The subsequent measurement is at fair value, so at the end of the year. And if there's any gain or loss in the change between initial fair value and subsequent fair value, those are related and recorded directly in the profit and loss account for the year. So reasonably straightforward as far as this one is concerned. Financial asset at fair value for other comprehensive income, again, initial measurement is at the fair value, the transaction price, with the difference being you need to include any attributable transaction costs. In other words, capitalize these transaction costs so that they form part of the cost price of the financial asset. So we don't expense this through profit or loss, you add it to the initial fair value. Subsequent measurement, exactly the same at fair value. And again, if there's any change in fair value or an increase or a decrease, that will be recognized as a gain or loss. But in this instance, it will go through other comprehensive income, not the profit and loss, that bottom section in our statement where it stipulates what is our other comprehensive income. There we will recognize any gains or loss associated with the financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income. So basically just based on the definitions, the accounting treatment on how we need to deal with the two different financial assets. Part B of this example, let's look at the following. We acquired 25,000 ordinary shares in a listed company on 1 April 2015, and these shares were acquired with a long-term view and not for speculative purposes. So there you can immediately identify what type of financial asset are we dealing with. It is not for speculative purposes, so this will be a financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income. These 25,000 shares were purchased at R4 per share, and the transaction cost relating to this purchase amounts to 7,500 and were paid by the purchaser. The market value at 30 June 2015, which is the financial year end, is R4.40 per share. Guys, remember we bought them at R4, but at the end of the year, the fair value is deemed to be worth R4.40 per share. Then on the 31st of July, we sold the shares. Now remember, we said these are not for speculative reasons, but in many instances, if you buy shares in the hope for capital appreciation, from time to time it might happen that you see that these shares are not delivering the results that you were hoping for. then obviously you are more entitled, even though it was not the intention to speculate with, to sell those shares. Now, this is exactly what happened on 31 July. And at the point when they were sold, the fair value at that stage was deemed to be R4.55 per share. The accounting policy of the company stipulates that the cumulative balance on the mark-to-market reserve needs to go to retained earnings. What is a mark-to-market reserve? That is specifically with your financial assets at fair value through other comprehensive income. Remember, we said that any fair value gain or loss needs to go directly to equity. Now, the account that deals with this equity change is your mark-to-market reserve account. That is an account where we'll price any gain or loss in fair value adjustments. So what we're required to do is to show all the journal entries relating to these transactions with all dates and calculations to be shown properly. So let's look at your journal entries. First of all, on 1 April, the date of acquisition, we'll recognize our financial asset, which is investment in shares. And if we paid cash for it, we'll credit bank, or if it was on credit, we'll create a liability. What is the cost price? We bought 25,000 shares at R4 per share, hence the 25,000 times 4. But remember that we are dealing with a financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income. And there, the accounting standard stipulates that you need to add the transaction costs and capitalize it as part of the cost price, the 7,500 rand. Therefore, the total cost price of the shares to be recognized will be 107,500 rand. So that's our debit to your financial instrument and the credit going to bank of 107,500. So that is your initial measurement. Subsequent measurement at financial year end 30 June. Now the shares are deemed to be worth R4.40 per share. Remember, it's stipulated here at financial year end, the shares are worth R4.40. So that is deemed to be the fair value as at that specific point in time. Meaning our investment is now worth R4.40. So it's still 25,000 shares, but it's now worth R4.40 per share. We have already initially recognized 107,500 as fair value. So this is the initial fair value. This is a fair value at the end of the year. The difference there is 2,500. And the fair value has increased, meaning we will increase the value of our financial instrument by the 2,500. And being a financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income, it directly goes to equity. And as mentioned, that equity account is your mark-to-market reserve, which will be credited with the 2,500 rand. So that is the recognition or your subsequent measurement recognition of the financial instrument at the end of the financial year. Then in the following year, on 31 July, we said that we are going to sell these shares. So before we record the sales transaction, we first need to do the fair value adjustment as at the date of the transaction. Now, at the date of the transaction, it is deemed that the shares are worth R4.55 on 31 July. So once again, you need to do a fair value adjustment at that point in time by saying now that 25,000 shares are worth R4.55, less the current fair value, which is 110,000. Remember, initial amount measured 107,500, increased by the subsequent change in fair value of 2,500 in the previous journal entry. So in total, the investment is reflected at the 110,000 currently, but on the date that the shares are going to be sold, this is the fair value, which is more than the 110,000. So once again, the increase goes to our financial instrument by debiting it with 3,750. And the credit goes to the mark-to-market reserve, which we credit with 3,750. So it's just, again, recognizing the change in fair value. Then we record the actual sales transaction by debiting bank if we receive the cash or creating a debtor, which would be for the full amount at which they would have been sold, being the fair value of R4.55 per share, coming to 113,750. Your total investment in share needs to be removed from the accounting records. So we take out the 107,500 initial measurement and the 2 subsequent increases in the fair value by crediting the investment in shares with the 113,750, meaning this account would now be 0 because it doesn't exist anymore, seeing that we sold the shares. And the final journal then would be to also eliminate the mark-to-market reserve from the accounting records. Okay, so we deposited 2,500 into this account at the end of the financial year, a further 3,750 on the date that we sold them. So currently it sits at 6,250 credit. So we eliminate it by debiting the mark-to-market reserve account, and this goes directly to our retained earnings account, because remember, we're taking it directly to equity and not through our profit and loss account. So those would be then the journal entries with regarding to this investment that we obtained by basically recognizing initially at the transaction price, including your transaction costs. At the end of the financial year, you make the fair value adjustment and take it directly to equity in your mark-to-market reserve. On the date that we sold them, we again make a fair value adjustment that we take to the market-to-market reserve, and then the final transaction would just be to remove the investment from the accounting records as well as the total mark-to-market reserve. Right, that is then this part of the question. Let's look at our second question for the evening. Here we've got investments with a financial year end for the company of 28 February 2015. We've got investment in Neptune for 45,000. The total issued share capital of Neptune is worth 40,000 and consists of ordinary shares issued at R2 each per share. Jupiter, the company that we're dealing with, owns 12,000 of these shares, and they were bought for 45,000 Rand, which is this amount here, on 1 July 2014. The directors are of the opinion that the fair value of the investment at the 2050 year end, in other words, at 28 February, remained unchanged. So according to the directors, they deem the fair value to still be this 45,000 Rand. We've also got the investment in Mercury for 250,000, where we own 100,000 of 2.4 million issued ordinary shares, which was purchased for 250,000 on 1 February 2014. Okay, so this would already have been in a previous financial year. The shares trades on the JSE, and the market value at 28 February 2014, the previous year end, was R2.50 per share. And the market value on 28 February 2015, the end of the current year, is R3 per share. And no adjustment has yet been made in accounting records for changes in fair value. These specific shares were purchased for speculative purposes. Okay, so in order to assist you to make the correct classification, meaning this will be a financial asset at fair value through profit or loss. And then we've got a third investment in Pluto for 40,000. Here we own 5,000 of the 20,000 issued shares, purchased on 1 May 2014 in the current year for that 40,000 Rand. This investment is designated as a financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income. In other words, these shares are not held for trading and falls in the second category of financial asset. The market value of these shares were R12 per share on 28 February 2015, the end of the current year. This adjustment must still be recorded. So how will we record the financial assets in the annual financial statements for the year ended 28 February 2015? First of all, we look at the different investments. Your investment in Neptune will be classified as a subsidiary. The reason for that being, Neptune had a total issued share capital of 40,000, but the shares were issued at R2 per share, which means in total, they have 20,000 shares issued. Of those 20,000, we obtained 12,000 shares, which gives us a 60% interest in Neptune. Now, any ownership of more than 50% is considered to be a subsidiary company. So basically, Neptune will become a subsidiary of us. As far as the disclosure is concerned, we'll just look at the disclosure, but we don't deal with subsidiaries. That is FAC 2602. So the cost price was 45,000. Remember, the fair value at the end of the year, the directors indicated that the fair value remained unchanged. meaning the fair value is still 45,000. So no adjustment is required from initial to subsequent measurement of this particular investment. Our second investment in Mercury is speculative investment. So at fair value to profit or loss was obtained at 250,000 Rand. It was already obtained in the previous financial year and stipulates at the end of the previous year, the shares are deemed to be worth 250 Rand. We have 100,000 shares invested, which means at the end of the year, the fair value is still 250,000. So no adjustment was required at the end of the previous year in the fair value. The opening fair value is still then the 250,000 carried over from the previous year. Now, at the end of the current year, the value is deemed to be 3 Rand per share. We have the 100,000 shares, which means at the end of the year, the fair value is 300,000 Rand, and there's an adjustment that will need to be made for 50,000 Rand, the increase in the fair value of this specific investment. It increased in value based on the fair value by a total amount of 50,000 Rand. Our third investment in Pluto at a cost price on the 1st of May of 40,000. But at the end of the year, 28 Feb 2015, the 5,000 shares that we purchased is deemed to be worth now 12 Rand per share. So the total investment's fair value subsequent measurement is 60,000. So again, we have a difference of 20,000, which we will need to make an adjustment for with regards to the difference between initial and subsequent measurement of fair value. A total adjustment of 20,000 Rand will have to be made. So once we've established that, as far as the disclosure in the financial statement is concerned, in your statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income for the year ended 28 February 2015, we will first of all have other investment income. And this is a gain on our financial asset through profit or loss, which we recognize directly through the profit or loss, the adjustment of 50,000. Remember this speculative investment, we said there was an adjustment that needs to be made for 50,000. It goes directly through profit and loss, seeing that it is a speculative investment, hence the recognition here as part of other investment income. As part of other comprehensive income, we recognize the gain on financial assets through other comprehensive income, the adjustment of 20,000, and this was our third investment year. This investment is not held for trading, hence the adjustment in fair value can't go directly through profit and loss. It goes to the bottom part of our statement, and it's part of your other comprehensive income, where we will disclose this 20,000 Rand. As far as the statement of financial position is concerned at the end of the year, your non-current asset, investment in subsidiary is always a non-current asset because it is investment that we keep for the long term. Therefore, the total 45,000 value at the end of the year will be recorded here as our asset value. Okay, remember we said that is the fair value at the end of the year, the 45,000 Rand. The second non-current asset is our financial asset at fair value to other comprehensive income, which will show at its end value of 60,000 Rand. Remember, investment is not held for trading, so there is no intention with regards to this financial asset and instrument to turn it over into cash within the next 12 months. That is why it needs to be classified as a non-current asset. Disclosed at its fair value at the end of the year, which we calculated here, the 60,000, the 5,000 shares at 12 Rand per share. Then other current assets will be our financial asset at fair value through profit or loss. Remember, with the speculative investment, the intention is there to buy and sell in order to try and generate profit. So this will occur several times during a financial period, which is 12 months. Therefore, it is a current asset, and all that we do is recognize the total fair value at the end of the year, which is the 300,000 that we calculated, the fair value at the end of the year, 100,000 shares at 3 Rand per share. Therefore, the disclosure as part of current assets for 300,000 Rand at the end of the financial year. And that is how we'll look at the disclosure in the 2 financial statements. So in our statement of profit and loss, we just reflect the fair value adjustments correctly through profit and loss and through other comprehensive income. And then in the statement of financial position, we basically just recognize the closing values, fair value at the end of the year for all the different investments, just correctly distinguishing between which is non-current and which is our current assets with regards to these financial instruments. Okay, our second last question, more a theory and discussion type of question. Discuss the concept of equity risk and how it is useful in determining whether a financial instrument is a financial liability or an equity instrument of the issuer. So first of all, what is equity risk? So equity risk refers to the extent to which holders of a financial instrument are exposed to losing their entire investment in that financial instrument. Because equity risk takers take the risk of not receiving any return on the investment. Okay, so if you invest in shares, as we've said, you are hoping to receive dividends on these shares, but there's no guarantee because it depends on the company in which you have invested in. If they don't make a profit in a specific year, they are not required to make a dividend declaration. So you've got no basic a right to receive any return on investment. And secondly, you also take the risk of not receiving back the amount invested, which means you can lose your total investment because these type of equity risk holders are only entitled to periodic returns once all the obligations of the company have been paid, and they can only be entitled to residual left over in the company on a winding up after all liabilities have been repaid. So if the company that you invested in goes into liquidity, if they are liquidated, it means all creditors are first settled. If there is still money left over, only then will equity holders receive their part, which means that you might lose your total investment that you made or only get back a part of the investment that you made. And that is what your equity risk is that you are exposed to losing not only the return on the investment, but also you might lose your entire investment that you made. It is a risk that you take for higher returns, hopefully, but yes, a total risk that you might lose the total investment and not even receive any return on the investment while you do have that investment on a yearly basis. How does it differ from debt investors? Your debt investors are entitled to periodic returns and can demand that the funds invested be returned. Debt investors bear credit risk and liquidity risk, but not equity risk. So what it means, if there is a debt that is outstanding, you are entitled in terms of the contract and agreement that is enforceable by law to receive periodic returns on the outstanding balance. Interest will be levied, and you have to pay that interest over and above the capital amount that needs to be repaid. As a debt investor, you'll be first in line if there is a winding down, if there's a liquidation of the company, because all the creditors needs to be settled first. So you bear the credit risk and the liquidity risk, and that is why it's important to distinguish between equity risk and your debt investor's risk, because it will help in determining whether or not a financial instrument is a liability or an equity instrument of the issuer, because it assists in determining the substance of the party's rights and obligations under the financial instrument. So with regards to equity risk, like we've said, with regards to the equity risk, you are exposed to losing the entire investment. And if you bear equity risk in any financial instrument, it will then obviously be classified as an equity instrument. If you have bearing credit risk and liquidity risk, it means you are entitled to periodic returns and can demand that the funds invested be returned in full. Therefore, such a financial instrument will need to be classified as a liability and not as equity. And that is then the basic distinction between the risk with regards to equity and your debt investors. Okay, our final question for tonight. Why are financial assets not all measured at fair value through profit or loss? Remember, we said we've got financial assets measured at fair value through profit or loss, or alternatively, financial assets measured at fair value through other comprehensive income. So why can't all not fall into this category? Now, our fair value model does not always provide the best and most correct or reliable information to users. What benefit or understanding would the user gain from knowing the fluctuations in the market price of an instrument when such fluctuations do not represent a change to the cash flows that the entity will be collecting? So the example here being, if you have a financial instrument not held for trading, as we've said, we need to determine the fair value at the end of a financial year. But the intention of such a financial instrument is not to sell it immediately. So yes, at the end of the year, it's a current fair value, but it does not really represent the actual cash flow that the entity will be collecting because they are not selling it at that point in time. They are not going to sell it within the distant future. So even though it is that fair value, it doesn't represent a realistic value for the user regarding that financial instrument. So in such a case, normally the amortized cost model provides more relevant and useful information about the amounts, timing, and uncertainty of contractual cash flows that will be collected with such instrument. Because the contractual cash flows doesn't only consist of the original transaction price, but also with subsequent cash flows in the form of dividends or interest that can be earned. Okay, so that is when we normally will measure this at amortized cost. Now, obviously, for our purposes, amortized cost is only something that you should take note of. You don't need to calculate the amortized cost, but it's just for the argument to say that there is an option also available with regards to financial assets at fair value to other comprehensive income. We also measure that amortized cost to give a more realistic and reliable value as far as the financial instrument is concerned, because a fair value at a specific point in time is not always indicative of what the actual value in future of that specific financial instrument will be. Where the cash flows are not purely interest and principal, in other words, your speculative cash flows, where the asset is held for trading and for sale, it would make more sense to hold such an asset at fair value. Yes, that is obviously the best way to calculate for a financial asset at fair value through profit or loss, because the intention is here to speculate. In other words, we are going to sell it at a certain point in time, which is not normally more than a 12-month cycle. So that fair value will be more realistic and the indication of the actual value of that specific speculative assessment, financial asset, and the financial instrument. Because this would provide the user of information on the expected, even if it's still unknown, future cash flows of the asset that they are going to sell. Yes, it is still unknown because, like the example that we used, the shares in that previous example. Let me just quickly go back there. Okay, let me just quickly go there. For this one, for example. So at the end of the year, this is the fair value of R4.40 per share. Yes, this is the expected fair value. It will be sold at a higher price just a month or so later, but this still represents a reasonably relatable fair value that can be relied upon and which is not far from the fair value that they will actually receive in future. Whereas the case on a financial asset at fair value to other comprehensive income won't be necessarily sold within the first month. And then a fair value might not be as reliable and relatable to the future cash flows to be received on that specific financial instrument. And that is why we can't have all our financial asset valued through profit or loss. We also need the second category of financial assets at fair value through other comprehensive income, to have a more relatable and reliable fair value to be accommodated. And that, ladies and gents, is my session for tonight. So I'll just quickly close down the presentations, and then we can look at any questions that you might have in the Q&A section regarding this presentation. Okay, going to our Q&A section, so more than welcome to drop any questions you might have on the channel that you would like to discuss in our Q&A section. We still have some minutes left over for our session, so please feel free to drop anything that you might want to ask in the Q&A section. Guys, I'm just monitoring the Q&A sections. The current time, there are no questions appearing in that section. Like I say, I can still allow 5 or 10 minutes time. Feel free to drop any questions that you might have regarding the presentation that we just had. Okay, first question there. Assignment number 4, is it morning or evening? Asking for us that is working. Okay, not sure. Assignment number 4, I would assume that you are referring to the exam. The exam is administered by the exam department. As far as I know, I've seen a notification that the final timetable was made available, and if that is the case, it would have been distributed to all students. So we don't arrange that exam, so therefore I wouldn't know at this point in time the exact time for the assessment. I have seen a preliminary date of 3 June, but I'm not 100% sure about the time, but there is a good possibility that it will, and it might be during daytime as well. And that specific exam, I think if I recall correctly, is going to take 4 hours to complete. Okay, are we going to get recordings? I was connected and disconnected with Neto and I joined late. Yes, as I've mentioned at the start of the session, all these sessions are recorded, and once recording is complete, it is uploaded under my modules on our module site. Just scroll down on the navigation tab towards the bottom and you'll find all the recordings there. Okay, regarding amortization, are we supposed to do those calculations? Now, as I've said, financial asset at amortized cost is specifically excluded for FSC 2601. You only need to discuss the theory part about that and can argue why amortized cost are maybe a better option for determining the fair value on your financial assets at fair value through other comprehensive income, not the calculations. Next question in, will we be asked about equity instrument? Yes, most definitely. You can be asked about the equity instrument. As I've said, it can either be in the form of the theory to discuss the equity risk, as we did in question 3, or in the example that we did where we bought the equity instrument in shares, that you need to be able to journalize those transactions and record it correctly and disclose it correctly in the financial statements. Still allow a few more minutes for questions. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A section, and I will gladly answer those. And currently monitoring still at this stage, not any new questions. Okay, thank you for making the time to read it, Lars. Great, Lars. Yeah, once again, like I say, it's only a pleasure. It was a problem on my side. So yes, it's not worthwhile if I do a recording with a blank screen and I do a whole session with a blank screen. Apologies for that. I should have checked up front. And as you've seen tonight again, it appeared again, but luckily I'm glad we got it sorted. And yeah, I mean, I just had to redo it. I couldn't just leave you in the dark, unfortunately, there. Okay, would it be possible to briefly explain the last question again? I did not fully understand it. Thank you. Okay, so what we did there, as we've said, with financial instruments, particularly financial assets, we initially measure them at fair value. Then, in subsequent measurement, you again need to determine the fair value, which is normally at the end of a financial year. Now, that question specifically look and said that why can't we have all financial assets disclosed at fair value through profit or loss? The first reason, therefore, being that some of these financial instruments, the assets that we hold, are not held for trading. So if they're not held for trading, then it means that any movements in fair value does not go through profit or loss. It goes directly through equity. So you can't really disclose them at the specific financial value. Sorry, you can't disclose them at fair value through profit or loss. In addition, what this question looked at is to say that even though we determine the fair value of the financial assets through other comprehensive income, that fair value is not always a reliable and representative fair value. Because remember, the intention is not to sell that asset. So yes, it determines a fair value at a specific point in time at the end of the financial year. But that is not realistically the fair value that will come to us in future. It might only come in 2-3 years' time. In that scenario, it is normally better to recognize those financial instruments and assets at amortized cost. So you just need to know the difference that you can recognize it at amortized cost. The actual calculation regarding amortized cost is not required from you. It's just to know that that is an option to provide a more reliable, fair value with regards to your financial instruments held through other comprehensive income. So I hope that explains your the last question to you. Okay, I will still allow another question or two if you should have any more questions before we close the session for this evening. Okay, and a pleasure. Yeah, I hope it was clear then on that last question, what we try to explain through that specific question, the difference between the two financial assets and the best way to value those assets. Okay, maybe give until 20 past. 1 or 2 minutes still remaining. Should you have any questions? Obviously, if you didn't get your question in now or don't have any question, or you go back maybe to this recording, and there's something that's not clear, feel free to send through a query in that regard to our mailbox, and we'll gladly assist you there. Yeah, just monitoring, no questions at the moment, no new questions. Okay, final minute to drop any questions in the Q&A part before we wrap it up for this evening. Don't see any new questions. Let me see, there's the one that has just come in there. Okay, is the exam going to be handwritten? Yes, that is the new policy that's been adapted, in that all written assessments needs to be in your own handwriting. So that will apply to the exam, as was the case with the second assessment. Yes, it needs to be in your own handwriting, and then in the end, convert that to a single PDF document that then will need to be uploaded on the My Exams platform. So exactly the same will apply as it did for assessment number 2. Okay, maybe one final question. Let's see if there's anything still coming through. One final question. Okay. Don't see anything coming through on the Q&A part. So I think then that is my sign to end our session tonight. Thank you so much for those of you that made the time to join me this evening. Once again, apologies for the issues encountered at the start of the session, as well as the cancelled, or rather the issue with the technical issues regarding the session last evening. As I've said, the recording will then be uploaded on our module site. I wish you a great evening further. Enjoy the long weekend. All the best until we meet again. Keep well, everyone. Goodbye.